To get started, let's look at the Docker learning repo. Once you're on my GitHub repo for projects, you can come to my repositories here. You can search your repositories, and we are going to be accessing the Docker learning repo. This repository will contain everything as far as Docker is concerned. So this is the Docker learning repo. It contains all the respective files that will be used in this tutorial. Now, in this given repository, I have different, basically an introduction to Docker, what Docker is. We look at the various Docker architecture. We've been able to explain this in our previous module, but here we are going to be looking more hands-on at what Docker is. But basically, Docker is a container runtime environment, and it gives us the possibility to run containerized applications. So we are going to be building Docker images, building Docker containers, manipulating some of those containers, and pushing these container images to our respective Docker Hub or Amazon Elastic Container Registry as the case might be. Now, basically, this is the Docker architecture, which we've already discussed previously. We have the Docker client, which is either going to be our EC2 instance, which we'll set up, or we are going to set up a Docker or download Docker Hub to use for this given example. Now we have the Docker client, we have our Docker host or the Docker server where we install our Docker daemon, and then we can create our images and create our containers. And then we equally have the Docker hub where we are going to be pushing some of the images. If we scroll down, this is basic information about Docker registry, some of the commands, some of the images as far as Docker registry is concerned. And then moving below, these are the instruction steps on how to set up a Docker Hub account. You can set up a Docker Hub account with your email, as well as you can set up a Docker Hub account with your Gmail, as well as you can sign into Docker Hub, and you can basically install or how to install Docker using an Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud instance and Amazon EC2 instance. Once you're on the repo, you also want to take note of some other components. We have various files. This is the main file which you have to take note of, is the main readme file, which is what we just went through. And then after that, we have our Docker images file, which we'll also be using to study Docker images. This is the file for Docker images. We have the file too for Docker containers. We'll be looking at Docker containers. So this is the file for Docker containers. We'll be using this to understand what Docker containers are and the respective commands as far as Docker containers is concerned. We equally have for Docker volumes. We equally have for Docker network. And then we equally have for Docker registry. And then we have lastly for Docker compose. So these are the various readme files which you need to take note of as far as this repository is concerned. But without wasting too much time, we are going to start by downloading Docker using Docker. We'll download Docker desktop, where we can run one or two commands with on Docker desktop. So let's go ahead to search Docker desktop. If you open a browser, you can search for Docker desktop. Can open a new browser and search for Docker desktop. Once you search for Docker desktop, you will see this Docker desktop, the #1 containerization tool for developers. Docker desktop is a collaborative containerization software for developers. Get started, download Docker desktop today on Mac, Windows, or Linux. So you click on this, you will see the link which you can use to download Docker desktop. And now downloading Docker desktop is based on the operating system which you are using. If you're using an operating system that is a Linux based operating system, you get a Linux Docker desktop. If you're using for Windows, you get a Windows Docker desktop. If you're using for Mac, you get a Mac Docker desktop. But once you download Docker desktop, this is the user interface of the Docker desktop. And then these are some various quick readme files. You have Docker engine, Docker CLI, Docker compose, Docker build, Docker debug, volume management, Docker Kubernetes. All of these are all found in Docker desktop. So to download Docker desktop, you just need to click here, and you see there are different options. We have download for Mac, Intel chip, Mac, Apple Silicon chip, download for Mac, AMD 64, Windows. So based on the operating system which you are using, you can download a particular Docker desktop. Irrespective of the operating system which you're using, the Docker desktop user interface will be the same. So I'll start by downloading Docker desktop for my Mac, because I'm using a MacBook computer. So I'll click on download for Mac Intel chip. If you're using a Mac and you don't know the version of your Mac, you could equally click on the right here, click on about this Mac, and then you should see the chip which your computer is using. So you can see mine is using Intel. So I'll just come here, download Docker desktop, and I'll select desktop Intel chip. You give me the download path which I can use to download the Docker desktop, and once downloaded, I can go ahead to install. So you see it's coming, downloading Docker desktop, and then I'll save this to my downloads. Once I save it to my downloads, if I come here, I'll see it's currently downloading Docker Desktop, the installation file. So irrespective of the operating system which you're using, you can use that to set up Docker Desktop. Now, while we have Docker Desktop downloading, we could equally create an account on Dockerhub. We'll be using Dockerhub to create images, to push images, and all that. So while we have Docker Desktop installing, we can create an account on Dockerhub. So you can open in your browser and you click on, or you type create Dockerhub account. You can create a Dockerhub account. The Dockerhub account is basically what we are going to use to push our container images. So if you want to create a Dockerhub account, you can sign up. You can create your account, work, personal, email, whatever the case. You can create an account on Dockerhub. So I'll leave the links to this in the chat. You can sign up to Docker where you create an account. So I'll click on the first one, sign up, and it will give me the possibility to sign up or to create an account on Dockerhub while we have our Docker Desktop downloading. So let's create an account on Dockerhub. So once you're here, I currently have an account. So I'll sign out to show you how to create an account. So I'll log out of my existing account and then create a new account so everybody can understand. I currently have an account with this username. So I'll sign out of this account. I'll sign out. If you already have an account, you can sign out, or you don't need to follow the steps to create an account. In this case, I'll be showing the steps to create an account for someone who doesn't have an account with Docker Desktop. So you can come to the main homepage where you can type hub or Dockerhub account. You can use this to create an account if you do not have an account on Dockerhub. So instead of clicking the first, you can just click the second, Dockerhub. We need Dockerhub because that's where we are going to be pushing our container images. So I'll click on the one which has hub.docker.com, hub.docker.com. And if you do not have an account, we are going to create an account, which is the step which we are trying to follow from the previous step. If I fill these details, you will not understand how the landing page is. So I want to take you first to the landing page where you can see more about Dockerhub before we start the account creation process. So this is basically what the Dockerhub looks like. Dockerhub basically is where we have all Docker images that have been created already. These are images, Docker's curated Gen AI catalog, everything you need to build, scale, and view with AI. So all images that have already been built are all found here on Dockerhub. You can search images based on the particular category. If you have any particular images you want to get from Dockerhub, you can find all those images here. For example, we have some most pulled images. These are databases and storage images. These are monitoring and observability images. These are new extensions. So all of these are images that have been created and stored officially on Dockerhub. If I want to get a particular image, I could search on Dockerhub here. Let's assume I want to search for the Jenkins image. I could type Jenkins over here, and then I'll get a Jenkins image that is already been created and it's stored on Dockerhub. So you see that different Jenkins image. They start by trusted content, community content. So I can click on the first one to see the official Jenkins image. This official Jenkins image gives me details about Jenkins, or the image has been customized or created as a containerized application. And you can also see more information about the image, when it was last updated. You see here the number of downloads. This image has over 1 billion plus downloads, and then 4.1k comments or reviews. So it is an overview of the Jenkins image. Another very important thing to take note of is if you want to get this image locally in your container runtime, you can copy this and then you will get this image locally, as well as the most, or one of the most important things equally, is to know the various tags. You can click on tags to know the image tags. What are these image tags? We are going to see based on the different versions of the Docker image that has been created. They are uploaded using tags. So with the help of tags, you can know, or you can use a particular version of an image. If you want to use a version 1 or version 2, version 3, or whatever the case might be, you can use these tags to get a particular version. So this is a version, this is a tag JDK 17, this is another tag latest -JDK 17, then this is the latest Jenkins image, this is another tag. So all of these tags are different versions of the Docker Jenkins image which you can use in your setup. So with all of these, you can basically search any image you want to get from Dockerhub repository over here. Once you get to Dockerhub, you make sure you're seeing this Dockerhub, and then you type the name of the image which you want to get, and then you can get the particular image tag. Now we want to create an account on Dockerhub, so I'll click on sign up because we do not yet have an account. I'm assuming we do not have an account on Dockerhub, so we're going to be creating a Dockerhub account. So for you to create a Dockerhub account, they'll ask you if you want to create a work Dockerhub account or you want to create a personal account. So I'll select a personal account. Now they also have different options. Do you want to send occasional product updates? Do you want to create the account using Google? Do you want to continue using GitHub? So these are different options. If you already have a GitHub account, you could continue with GitHub. If you already have a Gmail account, you can continue using Gmail. So if I click on continue with Google, it's going to give me different accounts which I can use to sign up, as well as if I do not have a Gmail account, or I could probably use my GitHub to enable account creation using GitHub. So I'll select the first one, continue with Google. So once I click on continue with Google, I'll select my Gmail DevOps with Mike, and then when I select DevOps with Mike, I'll then need to pick a particular username. So if I want to continue with the DevOps with Mike username, I can create the username. I could just use the name DevOps with Mike, or I could put any name that would be of interest. So I'll continue with the name DevOps with Mike. That will be the username which I'll assign. So I'll use the DevOps with Mike username, and then since I do not want Docker to be sending me occasional emails, I'll not tick this. So based on the username which you provide, they will tell you if you can sign up or not. So it's searching if that username is available. If the username is not available, then I'll have to change the username. So let's give it a bit for it to search. So they say cannot use this name, choose a different one. They give proposals on the names which you can use. Probably DevOps with Mike is already being used, so they say you can use a different name. You should make sure you could use a different name. So I'll use the username DevOps with Mike 86. Let's try this. So if you're trying to create with a username that is already being used, you could go in to use another username. So DevOps with Mike 86 is currently available, so I could probably go ahead to use this particular username. So once you see that the username is available, you can click on sign up, and when you click on sign up, you should be able to receive, or you receive an email. Now once you receive that email, the email basically is an email which you must use before you can authenticate. Once you get that email, the email is basically telling you you've been able to create a Dockerhub account, and then it gives you some basic information about Docker. So basically, once you create an account, this is how you see the desktop, or this is how you see the environment or the landing page once the account has been created. If you want to know where your username is, you can just click on this icon here. You see a username. You remember this is very important information which you must always take note of, because this is what you use to tag your container images. So you take note of your username, and then since you've already created an account, you can see they give you some basic products, Docker Desktop, Docker Cloud, and all of these. You can also sign in as admin. So basically, if you want to get more details, you can find images, the admin console, and all of these. You can also click here to see what's new. If you want to open to see more Docker products, you can see all of the new Docker products. And basically, when you create an account with Docker, you can then start managing Docker. So since we have created an account, let's go to Dockerhub, because this is where we are going to be pushing our images. So let's click here. Once you're on this page, once an account has been created, you click on this page that says Dockerhub. So you click on this page that says Dockerhub. It should take you to the page where you can set up Dockerhub. And this is the page where you can set up Dockerhub. It basically looks like this. You see, welcome to Docker, download the Docker Desktop application. We already downloaded Docker Desktop in our previous tab, so we do not need to download it. If you come here, we have download the Docker Desktop application. You can download it with Mac Intel chip, or you can download it with Apple Intel chip. Like I said, depending on your operating system, you can download it for Windows and for Linux. So basically, as far as Dockerhub is concerned, you could create a repository. If you want to create a repository, you could view some Docker basics. If you don't know the Docker basics, we are going to see them in the subsequent modules. If you click here, it's going to give you some Docker basics, how to manage images, how to manage containers, and all of that. As well as if you want to learn some specific guides, how to containerize specific application using Docker. So they give you some other guides on language specific ways which you can manage applications. So these are Docker guides. Set up company for success with Docker. Docker build, reclaim your time fast. So these are some different guides which you can use. Securing your software supply chain with Docker Scout. All of these are guides, specific guides for Docker. You see introduction to GitHub Actions with Docker. So if you want to get, for example, how to set up GitHub Actions with Docker, you can get this. Configure your GitHub repository, set up your GitHub Actions workflow, extract metadata, tags and annotations, authenticate your registry, build and push the image, attestation. So this is just a basic project that you can also implement. There are a lot of them. If you come to the guide, you see face detection with TensorFlow, build a language translation app. You can click on build a language translation app, get the sample app. This is the repository, view the code, explore the application code. So these are some basic steps. Once you do all of these, you can create a Docker file, and then you can run the application, then you can push the app to your Dockerhub repository. So these guides gives you the possibility to also have more practical hands-on. Node.js, you can build a named entity recognition app. You can pre-seeding database with schema. All of these, build a text recognition app, use containerized databases. If you want to do a containerized database, you can click on containerized database. So basically, all of this gives you the possibility to even have more practical hands-on as far as Docker is concerned. If you're looking at DevOps concepts, you can building compose projects with Bake, introduction to GitHub Actions with Docker, and then mastering multi-platform builds, testing and running using building Bake. So with these Docker guides, you can get more practical hands-on. So that's basically how you can use the Docker guides. Let's come back here. Once you're here, you can also take note of repositories. The repository is basically where you can keep your images. They say create a repository, push container images to a repository on Docker. So if you want to create a repository, a Dockerhub repository, you can click on create a repository, and here you'll be able to configure specific configurations for your repository. And one thing to take note of when creating a repository is the repository could either be public or private, and Docker gives you the possibility to set up just one private repository. The rest of the repositories will be public. So if you want to create a repository, you must take note of the namespace. This namespace is what I said is up here, the most important information. That means any image you want to push, you must save it using this namespace. So this namespace corresponds to the namespace which your account has, and then you keep the namespace, and then you can give any name of the repository. If you want to add a basic description, you can also add a basic description. So this is basically how you can create a Dockerhub account. So I'll cancel this. We are going to see this subsequently when we are going to be pushing images to our Dockerhub account. This is basically how you can create an account on Dockerhub. You can create repositories and then push images to repositories. You can equally create a repository over here. So the last thing is for us to set up our Docker desktop. Let's set up Docker desktop and then move on to more practical concepts. So once the Docker desktop has completed downloading, you can come to your downloads. You can open the folder in which the item was downloaded, and you should be able to see all the content. So if I open this is a download. Because I'm using a MacBook, this is the image for the Docker desktop. So I'll open this. This will give me the installation guides for Docker desktop, and I can use this to set up Docker desktop on my system. So for MacBook system, it's pretty straightforward. You move these to your applications, and once you drag that from these to your applications, you can see here copying Docker to applications or 6 days less than 1 megabit. So the procedure will actually be a little bit different for Windows, but all the same, you'll see perform the same set of actions. When you drag it from the downloads to your applications, if you're using a MacBook, you can just search for Docker, and then you will see Docker. So Docker has been installed. You'll see Docker. I can minimize all these existing tabs. So once you search Docker, is verifying Docker. Once you click on that, basically it's going to open the Docker desktop. Like I explained earlier, the Docker desktop for MacBook is the same like the Docker desktop for Windows, and you can use both of them to perform the same set of actions. So basically, let me open the Docker desktop, and then you open up Docker desktop, which we are going to basically see how it operates. So they say Docker subscription service, you can accept. Then let me minimize this. There's a tab. They say use recommended settings. I'm going to use recommended settings. So finish setting up Docker desktop. I'll use recommended settings. It says requires a password. Docker automatically sets the necessary configuration that work for most developers. So I'll finish this. You need to set up a password. I'll use the same password for my computer system. So I'll use the same password for my computer system to log into Docker. And when I put in those information, or once you put in your password information, you'll basically be able to launch Docker. So this is basically how Docker desktop looks like. So I'll allow Docker to access my local networks, and I'll maximize this. You see Docker desktop personal. Basically, I can skip this. If I don't want to set up the account yet, I can skip this. Let me just take skip. Once I skip this, there's some basic survey which you need to submit. So are you a full stack developer, back end, platform, infra, security engineer, product manager, teacher, data scientist, system admin, DevOps specialist, site reliability engineer? So let's take DevOps specialist. They ask which area are you would you like to use Docker for? Testing images, testing applications. Let's use deploying applications, and I'll take continue. Now when you take continue, basically Docker desktop has been set up. This is your Docker desktop. You can use this 5-minute guides. What is a container? How do I run a container? Let me close this. This is for containers, these images, volumes, builds, Dockerhub, Docker Scout, extensions. So let's take Docker images, for example, how to manage images, search images to run. Images are used to run containers. So if you move from your Docker file, Dockerhub, images to run your container, and in Dockerhub repositories, you can sign in to connect to a particular repository. Then you can come to your local. Now, if you want to run any Docker command, you come to the bottom here, you will see terminal, a terminal directly within Docker desktop. So if I click on here, you open a terminal. So I can enable this terminal. Once you enable this terminal, you can always use this terminal to run Docker commands. So if I run, for example, the command Docker, we'll see this command in the next module. If I run, for example, Docker images, you see there's no image currently in my local. If I do Docker search Nginx, you will see it's going to search for the Nginx image. These are the various different versions of the Nginx image. So once you have Docker desktop installed, you can run all the Docker desktop configurations. In the next module, we are going to see how to set up Docker on an AWS EC2 instance before we can proceed with running Docker configurations and Docker commands. So this is basically how you can set up Docker desktop to access. Now, Docker desktop also has one very important feature which is an advantage. If you click on the Docker desktop settings here, you can also use Docker desktop to enable Kubernetes. So you can set up a one node Kubernetes cluster. If you're trying to do some Kubernetes related applications, you can set up a one node Kubernetes cluster to use as far as Kubernetes is concerned. So you can see your Docker engine is running per the terminal. If you want to stop the engine, you can pause the engine, or you can click here to avoid it freezing your system. You can quit Docker desktop. So if I click on quit Docker desktop, it's basically going to stop the engine, and then you no longer have this Docker desktop running and consuming your system resources. So you click here, you can quit Docker desktop. You could equally restart based on the settings. So we've basically quit Docker desktop. So basically, that's how you can make use of Docker desktop to manage and run our Docker applications. In our next module, we are going to see how to set up the same on an Amazon EC2 instance.